Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Talking About the Big Stuff podcast with Michael Cole and Matthew Cravat. I am Michael Cole.
And I am Matthew Cravat.
All right, let's get started, folks. Welcome back, everybody.
Why don't we get things started? What? Why don't we get things started on the most sensational, Muppetational?
Oh, yeah. That's coming back. Logan goes, Sabrina Carpenter is going to be on the Muppet Show. I'm like, as a guest.
Oh.
Like, she's not just going to be on the show. I'm like, it's like a variety show. There'll be a different guest every week. And he's like, oh.
Have you seen the ad with her?
But that still means it's not hot. No, it's still going to be hot.
So there's an ad where
I don't think Logan
Kermit are in the dressing room, and Kermit says, "You'll have to forgive us. We're new to coming back. We still have some kinks to work out." And she goes, "It's okay. I like kinks." And Kermit just stops. He goes, "Oh!" Like just stares at her and starts to shake.
Nice. All right. So welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the big stuff. Now, I wanted to talk about critical thinking and critical reading. And I know that we've kind of touched on these issues before, but it is never going to not be a thing that we need to talk about. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, critical reading is a good idea. I like doing critical reading sometimes.
So let me, as I usually do, let me explain why I thought this was a good topic for us, in addition to, the normal. So two things that I watched over the last week kind of made me think that critical thinking was a really important. We'll throw those up in the links so that people can see some good resources.
What? A signed copy of Skeptic's Guide to the Universe? Oh my God, the whole Rogues Gallery signed it.
Nice. So anyway, two things that I watched in that kind of built up some in my head, like the idea that we need to talk about this is first, there was a video by Thought Slime, which I have queued up. I can show you a clip in a few when we get to that, talking about that specifically. And then the other, this is going to sound weird, but for Alex and I, our other podcast, we were watching the movie Malcolm X, and there is a scene in Malcolm X. I hope this isn't a spoiler, Alex, where we see Malcolm in prison and a guy trying to, convert him, trying to get him to become part of the Nation of Islam. And in that process, he is talking to him about, like, how can you be, how can you basically talk about using the N-word and all these ways that the black people are referring to each other. So he brings them to the prison library, and they go into the dictionary and they look up the definition. This is 1948, maybe 49. And they look up the definition of black and the definition of white. And he reads, and Denzel's amazing as always. Denzel reads the definition of black, and it's bad, right?
Yeah.
It's, the way that they're describing it isn't like devoid of
all the metaphoric uses are always negative, right?
Yes. And then he gets to white, and it's like angelic, pure. Black was like sullen and dirty, and he's like, this is written by, why is it like this? And he's like, this must be written by white people. And the guy basically says to him, like, that's why we need to, like, think more about, like, we can't just start using these words. We need to think about them. And so one of the like meditations that he essentially does is copying every word in the dictionary and, like, examining every word in the dictionary.
Oh, yeah.
That might be a bit extreme for our purposes, but it's a good start to to this idea of, like, we need to start thinking about things critically. I also think there's some spots in the movie when Malcolm is, he's the face of the Nation of Islam, and there's a guy that comes and wants to join, and he basically says, like, what do you know about us? And he's like, why would you want to join if you don't know? Like, go learn. And Malcolm throughout the whole movie is learning about, he's talking about reading Bible passages, Matthew, and a bunch of other stuff. So, like,
my Bible passages.
Yeah. And so he's talking about kind of just being, like, this idea of, like, thinking about and examining everything. And I know that we are atheists, the three of us, and we're skeptics, and so talking about a religious figure doing that is sometimes odd. However, that's how so many atheists become atheists. And who knows, you know, Malcolm X was younger than all three of us when he died. So who knows where he would have ended up eventually with that kind of critical thinking. I don't want to prescribe any of that to him, but I think that he was a great example of learning how to critically think. And that's what I saw in the movie. A lot of what I saw in the movie was his ability to actually examine things. And we are sorely lacking as a society for that right now.
Joseph and I watched the second episode of the part 2 of the Mel Brooks documentary from Judd Apatow last night, and they had the Dave Chappelle doing Malcolm X, the Plymouth Rock landed on us line in that clip from Robin Hood Men in Tights there. It's fun.
And another thing that Alex and I will get into this part a little bit on the podcast, but Malcolm X, a movie by Spike Lee about Malcolm X and about Islam itself, is kind of a great example for me of like growing up, like that was all a bunch of stuff I wasn't supposed to, know. Malcolm X was a guy who hated white people, and Islam is a bad religion, and Spike Lee is a director who hates white people, and all these things that now I'm like, especially watching that movie and having watched interviews with both Spike Lee and Malcolm X, I'm like, okay, there is so much more nuance, and like I don't think either of them hates white people. Now, Malcolm X at a certain point in time seemed to distance himself drastically, but like even how we look at the movie and the story of Malcolm X and who he was as a person is something that we need to give that critical thinking to. So like it was kind of a perfect encapsulation of all the things. Like he's a critical thinker. We need to be critical thinkers to like even get past our own biases not based on stuff he said, but based on our parents and grandparents
in which we live and what we've been infused with.
Yeah. So that was, that's how we kind of got, the big thing I got into it with. But then I was randomly, I don't watch those movies when I'm doing like the dishes. I want to focus more when I'm watching something like that. So I'll like listen to YouTube videos a lot when I'm doing dishes or doing stuff around the house.
Thanks.
And I watched a thought slime video. I don't watch this YouTube video, but I will like, you don't have to necessarily see the stuff on the screen. Whereas for Malcolm X, I want to see the cinematography. Right. But for like talking head YouTube videos, I do not need to see. It's essentially an audio format. Right. So I'm going to share, I want to just watch a couple minutes of this real quick and talk about this, because this is kind of where he gets into it for me, where I thought it was like, oh, this is really interesting. We should be talking about this. So this is an article written by someone from The Atlantic about it's a black man wrote this article about woke, basically like everything being woke and how it's ruining the publishing industry.
Mm-hmm. Almost extra consideration to anyone who wasn't a white man, and then provided just that. Help! They're providing extra considerations. Savage marshals ample data to make his point. In 2011, he writes, white men occupied 48% of lower-level TV writing positions. In 2024, they filled 12%. Out of 45 tenure-track hires in the humanities and social sciences at Brown University since 2022, he says, just 3 have been white American men. Since 2015, according to Savage, 70 millennial writers have been named finalists for National Book Awards. Once again, he writes, only 3 have been white men. Those are some conspicuously specific examples, wouldn't you say? Only 12% of lower-level TV writing positions. Only 3 people in the tenure track for specifically the humanities and social sciences at Brown University. Of the 70 millennials nominated for the National Book Awards, that kind of thing should ring alarm bells for cherry picking. If broader statistics were similar, why would Savage, and by extension Williams, need to choose such absurdly specific statistics? And that first example is is particularly telling to me because it's evidence of a supposed hiring bias against white men that they represent only 12% of lower level TV writing positions in 2024. And just taking that at face value, is it not also a problem that in 2011 that they represented 48% of said positions?
Yeah.
Why does it become a problem when they are supposedly underrepresented, but not when they're overrepresented? Because in order for them to be overrepresented, definitionally, someone else would have to be underrepresented. So why is it only a problem now? But let's not take it at face value, because that cute little qualifying phrase, lower level TV writing positions, got me thinking, what about if you didn't qualify it like that? What if you didn't phrase it in that very deliberate way? What happens? Do you get the same result? Or do you, I don't know, get a wildly different result? Gee, I wonder, if only there was a way to check. So let's take a cheeky little peek at that Writers Guild of America's Inclusion and Equity Report 2025. And in 2024...
All right, we'll keep going in a second, but like that's all of what he just did is, or I'm sorry, I'm not sure what their pronouns are. I think their pronouns may be they. Because last time I watched, they seemed to be identifying as a man, but in this, they seem to be a little more fluid, and I don't see anything on there for pronouns, so I'll say they. Last time, or when from where I stopped it, Thought Slime is talking, like completely all of the information that he just pulled before we go into this report is from the article itself. So there was no need up until that point for that amount of work and that amount of examination to even leave the page. And that was really interesting to me when I was listening to this, was like how, it's something I almost certainly have overlooked in the past, is these uses of words. I remember working at Verizon. I worked at Verizon in between 2007 and 2010, and we were, America's most reliable wireless. And it was like, that was the way we were legally allowed to make that claim. I remember someone telling me that. And, like those adjectives can do a lot of work, or modifiers, in those
they can be some heavy lifting, for sure.
Yeah.
In pharma marketing and diagnostic as well, the law is you cannot be false or misleading. So even things like that are lawyers like, you can't even play those games of finding the exact right where you have to be accurate without misleading. And I used to teach the kids to watch TV commercials that way. Yeah. Like if you saw a painkiller, like a headache treatment, right? And it said, no one's been proven faster than product X. To point out, what do you think that means? Like, well, it's the fastest. I said, they didn't say they're faster. Yeah. They said no one has been proven faster than them. That could mean they're the same speed, or it could just mean they haven't run a test that proved it yet. And if they did, like, you got to be careful of what they say, because in pharma, they're not lying. They're using exactly correct terms.
Well, especially if it's something that is, let's say, 9 out of 10 brands are all on, and fastest when it comes to medicine is like different, I guess, than like, I'm thinking like speed of, they're all driving 60 miles per hour. None of us drove faster.
7 out of 10 dentists.
Nobody drove faster than me. And it's like, well, everyone was keeping the same pace. So like,
which is it's still a valid claim of saying, saying, sure, I'm not inferior to anyone else. Nobody's fast. Like, you're not going to find a faster one, but it's not, I'm faster than them.
Yeah. This water has 100% less carbs than other waters. It's because 100% of zero is still zero.
When the gluten thing was a big deal, it's like all the stuff that never had gluten was gluten free. No freaking way. So someone with a food science degree, that was when I started really noticing it. I was like,
well, I think it's more appropriate things that say non-GMO. It's like there's only a handful of GMO products on the market. Yep. So like things say there's non-GMO when all of tomatoes are non-GMO or whatever. Like there is not a GMO one to have.
Yeah.
So to Thought Slime's point, I just looked at the Patreon, and the Patreon uses male pronouns that are out.
Oh, okay.
So either it hasn't been updated or he uses male pronouns.
Twitter looks the same. But Twitter looks pretty like use what you want.
Out there. Yeah, what he's pointing out there seems to be what I would call the logical fallacy of cherry picking. So it's when the people he's critiquing cherry picked the exact stats that looked best.
Yeah.
It's also perhaps Texas sharpshooter potentially as well, which one of my favorite fallacies, the Texas sharpshooter, is sharpshooter, guy goes out with his rifle, starts shooting at the back of or the side of his shed or his barn, and then he walks over and looks for the biggest grouping of holes, draws a circle around it and says, look at my aim. So it's like you're looking at the data and say, oh, this seems to pop up a lot. I'll say that's what I was looking for. When if you look at a large set of data, you're always going to find things that are coincidentally popping up. I mean, that's if you're not looking for it, you're not statistically powered to say that means anything.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you throw a bunch of cards in the air and grab 5 at random and you happen to grab 5 black cards, you go, oh, that proves black cards are more likely to be grabbed. It's like, no, you can't say that after you randomly grabbed it. That's just what it came up that time.
Yeah. So I want to go a couple minutes. I want to go a little bit further into the video because the next point, like I liked that was self-contained within the article, that you could pull that all out and to some extent show like it at least deserves a deeper look. Now with the deeper look, I want to show like what ThoughtSlime found that, this is likely to be, I don't expect everyone to do research on everything all the time, but if you're reading critically in that way that ThoughtSlime did on that first part, this is what could be hidden there and what very often is hidden. So
screenwriters were 44.4% white men, whom the report also helpfully notes represent 28.3% of the general population. Now, if you're not a math whiz, 44 is considered to be a bigger number than 28 by most experts in the field. So, would appear white men are still well overrepresented by almost 2 to 1. But what if we break up these two words, white and men? Then we find that 66.4% of writers were men and 64.6% were white. I'm no statistician, but I think you would be hard-pressed actually to suggest that they represent a hiring bias against white men. It's telling that Savage uses the example of specifically lower-level writers because, as near as I can tell, that's just about the only statistic one could cherry pick from these reports that, on a surface reading, even appears to support the case he's trying to make. The section of the report which the statistics come from is careful to note that these numbers are not reflective of trends among higher-level positions. I wonder how Savage missed that. Let's think about that for a little second. Let's take a moment, have a sip of tea, and have a single thought about that. Either white men are just inherently better writers and better qualified than their non-white and or non-man peers, a position which I think is unlikely to be the case because it is self-evidently racist and sexist, or within the industry, there exists a culture which, however unintentionally, discourages women and racialized people and the intersection thereof from succeeding. The obvious inference from this data is that attempts at making entry-level hires more diverse are likely.
So what's ironic to me is that Savage could have made a good claim for his ideological position off that data.
It was there.
Could have said that this data shows that in the last 2 years, they've been DEI hiring and only hiring minorities or marginalized communities or whatever. Like he could have made that argument and it would have been honestly reflecting the data at least. It's an assumption of why.
Well, we get there in a minute because when you look at the data, like when you take another step back, which I think is where ThoughtSlime is getting in a second.
Yeah. But I would also say that obviously the real thing is they have probably reduced some of the bias in their hiring, and that's why it's equaling out or coming closer. Not that they have gone too far the other way.
Yeah. So let's
not the result of institutional gatekeeping, as Savage would prefer to believe, but rather an attempt to correct for the existent institutional bias, which continues to favor white men, who remain overrepresented and are even more overrepresented in higher level positions. The amount of information that Savage, and by argument, to quote the 4th page of this report, which I simply can't stress enough, is Savage's source. The number of WGA screenwriters declined between 2020 and 2024, and shares of screen employment held by men, women, BIPOC, and white writers have changed modestly since 2020. The largest shift was a 3.4 percentage point increase in the share of women screenwriters in 2024. Oh, that's the problem then. That's got to be what it is. It's the women are taking they have 3.4% more now. So that's what accounts for all of this, right? Men of the world, you must revolt against your female overlords.
I mean, most of my
So
thoughts
that's the
have
first
infinite,
example. I don't think it's very good. The second example he gives is that of 45 tenure track hires in the humanities and social sciences at Brown University, only 3 were white males, according to Savage. Anyway, his proof for this, I don't know what his proof for this is, because he links to an article from Brown about their tenure track hires, and that article lists 38 of them. So we're not off to a strong start.
There's a bunch more. I mean, the video I will link the video below because it goes on for 30 minutes, and Thought Slime does such an amazing job of just also very funny, I think. But Thought Slime is really funny, but they he pulls this is very, and we don't have to necessarily talk all about DEI and race in this particular thing. Like this is just an example of this is really badly.
He did a really good
It's
job of
poorly
analyzing
framed.
the words used and finding the fallacies in the words, then dig up and find that the point being made was wrong.
Right.
What frustrates
it reminds me though of the Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote where she goes, "When I'm asked how many women should be on the Supreme Court to be balanced," and she says, "I say 9," and they look shocked, and I'm like, nobody was ever shocked when it was 9 men, but if I say 9 women, that seems wrong.
Yeah.
So it's some of the same situation when, and being that we are currently live through the power of the internet, it has frustrated me as someone who grew up in an academic household that had teachers and professors as family members, that the internet has put so much information that is not always vetted or verified or written in a neutral lens in the hands of way too many people that had no business attempting to understand it without context. Not that they can't eventually, but it wouldn't stop them from burning up their thumbs, responding or creating. Or
we don't teach media literacy nearly enough. And when I was a kid, we did a little. I remember bringing the newspaper and you're supposed to read it and say, did it have a bias?
I
we were
remember
looking
doing
for
that,
bias in newspaper articles when I was a kid, but it doesn't seem like that has taken very well.
Well, and algorithmically, even if you and I shared something that is correct, like factually, perfect, and we shared it, and let's say it actually gets picked up by the algorithm, you don't based on the snippet that you could get the algorithm on Instagram, on Reels, on YouTube Shorts, you don't have time to back up your sources and for people to know, and people are using that as info.
Yeah.
And so and
it's easier to provide bullshit when you don't have to have a source than it is to debunk it and have to have a source.
So so the literacy part of this, to me, and that's why I like that you did critical thinking and reading at the same time, because the understanding of bias, like Matthew was talking about, or in Thought Slime's video, the creative or clever omission of the only other side of this, which is the other gender or other races that were being discussed, it's so easy to sound sensational without the real backdrop of the part I'm not mentioning, or the piece that I'm not telling you because you're so excited by the piece that sounds salacious, and that's what you meaning the audience runs with. And we on this podcast, I feel, do a damn good job of backing up our take and or our position by having guests or by giving examples of our own. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that if someone was to run off and research any of this, they're not going to unfortunately come across some poorly framed data and not do the reading to understand it.
Yeah, yeah. And, we're at a point where echo chambers are bad enough that we are assuming sources are good and not verifying on that side of things because, I love Mehdi Hassan. I love Sam Cedar. Or if you're on the other side, I love Tucker Carlson. So obviously FDR, not FDR.
Jackie Jr.?
No. The
FDR drive?
Winston. Obviously, Winston Churchill was the bad guy of World War II. And, I don't know if you guys have caught that he's selling that lie right now.
That's a
that
good
we,
one.
but like, you know, like we are getting caught in these these echo chambers, and like they're hard to break out of, and unfortunately I think they're reinforcing a lot of this like lack of ability
Yeah.
to, you know, to parse, and then there's also a slight attack on semantics, you know, like the idea of like, well, don't you know, don't parse my semantics. There's like that is, you know, but it's and that reminds me, you know, to some extent of Matthew's favorite joke about I can please any woman. My wife says I can have any woman I please. I just can't please
Unfortunately, I
them.
don't please any.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, well, that's, you know, if you just take that first part, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I can have any woman I please. Like, but you have to like pull from that amount of those wording, similar to the way Thought Slime says, you know, like millennial, you know, like highlights the fact that it's millennial specific, and that's really tough. And then if you call that out sometimes, or you start to, you know, like especially in conversation, what, you know, the way we get out of echo chambers is not going to be through the algorithm.
No.
It's not going to be through online. It's going to be through conversations in person. But when you do that, there's a politeness, and there is certain things that are, you know, I don't have, but the average person has, that will hinder some of that too. So like if, you know, you've all talked to somebody who's crazy, you know, about, you have some crazy opinion on something, and you're like, and they're like, you know, that 99% of all statistics are made up on the spot. And you're like, you know, like sometimes you'll jokingly be like, that's not true.
Yeah.
But like if they're not ridiculous, if that, it doesn't sound as ridiculous, and you're like, that
I
doesn't sound right to me, you
I
won't
had
call
a
it out as much.
I had a I'll say mentor, but friend of my dad's who was one of my comedy, you know, mentors. Like I model a lot of my long form joke telling after him, and he was the best at just bullshitting with a
Yeah.
straight face and keeping it up so consistently people didn't know what was true and what wasn't. And like sometimes it was like an obvious joke to me, but I feel like people wouldn't get it. About like one of my favorite like quick snaps of his was, it's like he said, did you know that 60% of married men cheat in America? The other 40% go to Mexico or Canada to cheat.
Nice. And there, you know, there is an extent to which we can't, you know, we can't be held to the standard of detecting all bullshit and verifying all bullshit. But if we can slowly, as I mean, even that book would I'm sure Cecil and Tom would admit
Yeah,
that like
it's a
sometimes
toolkit to help you detect bullshit,
Yeah.
but nothing is
right.
universal. But there's also
Hey,
a matter of if I meet you and you say, "Hey, my name is Ralph," and you're lying, I don't give a shit that you're lying. So
right,
it's not worth it to me to detect if it's bullshit or. It's
right.
kind of the importance of it determines on how much you have to verify. If it's something you're going to take action on, you might want to verify it first.
Yeah. There's also an extent to which I feel like this idea of building up our critical thinking is similar to herd not herd mentality, herd immunity, where like ultimately, if you know, if we got back to a time, if we ever, I don't know
If
that
enough
we
people didn't share bullshit, it wouldn't go viral.
well that, but also like if we got to the point where it was no longer impolite, and we were, you know, or we didn't have those things, and enough people, then you might feel that sense of like nervousness or shame, or
This
hey,
horrible
maybe I'm not
irony
gonna.
that it's more impolite to point out that somebody's wrong than it is to spread wrong information.
Right. And you know, there's a fair amount of those people that are being, they're repeating bad information that they don't know is wrong.
Yeah, but there are people
And
who
then
get upset that I don't want to be
Yeah.
corrected. It's considered rude to correct me. I'd rather
Yeah.
be wrong than
Yeah.
be corrected,
Right. And that's
which is the opposite of skepticism, which is the
Yeah.
desire to be less wrong tomorrow than you were today.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
way that happens is by getting corrected when you're wrong.
Oh yeah, yeah. And you know, there's a lot of the problem here too is that people think everyone's opinion has merit, and all opinion, and it's like, well, everyone is entitled to their opinion does not mean the same as everyone's opinion has merit, but also
Opinions
sometimes
are like assholes.
but some things are right or wrong, and if your opinion, it's like, well, yeah, I think that Joe Biden's the best president ever because he passed gay marriage. It's like, well, sure, you can argue that he's the best president ever, but he did not pass gay marriage. He's not the guy who did it.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's the thing. It's the fallacy. which is just because someone uses a logical fallacy in their argument doesn't mean their argument's wrong. They just made a bad argument for it, but they still could be arguing the correct thing. And the opposite works too. Just because you gave a great example doesn't mean you're right,
Right. And so like we need to we really need to figure that part of things out too, where we don't agree with people just because they're on our side. Like the sky is blue. On your average nice day outside, we can all agree that the sky is blue. That's not because of the Smurf Dome that I've talked about before. And if someone's out there saying it's the Smurf Dome, that guy's not on our team just because he came to the right conclusion about the sky being blue.
Right.
Not about why. Like we need those and if we are able to start challenging those things and start just being honest, and you could be polite and correct somebody. There's a difference between like, what are you, stupid? You think it's Smurfs? And being like, hey, like, I mean, that's examples extreme and what are you, stupid? But like, if on some of these examples that aren't as ridiculous or extreme, to be like, hey, that doesn't sound right, so I looked it up and that's not right. So there is a nice way versus, what are you, a fucking moron? Like,
I think I talked about this when I was on Embrace the Void podcast with Aaron Rabinowitz. But one of the things I was thinking when you're playing Thought Slime was, one of the things that irks me is when there's an argument our side makes that irks me because I think it's wrong, and they make it all the time. It's a meme argument almost.
The pie one.
When white supremacists or separatists or Christian nationalists or whatever, that side gets upset about a DEI hiring practice, like when there really is one. It's like, we want people with more variety because it makes our marketing team better if we have people who can relate to other people. So we're actively looking for people of marginalized groups that we don't currently have representation for.
Yeah.
And they get mad about that. And our side will often say, equality is not like a slice of pizza, not like a slice of pie. There's plenty. Like, you don't get less because they got more. And I'm always like, that's not true. You do get less. I mean, if
some of these pies only have just so much in them.
Had an 85% chance of getting a job because of racism and prejudice, and now I don't have that 85%. I have a smaller chance at the pie now.
Yeah,
that's a good thing for society and for things, but it's a bad argument to say that that you have the same size pie, because you don't. Like those numbers show, right? Some less people are white people are getting hired at the entry level.
Yeah,
which is good, because you need to do that to get the mix where it should be. But it's also true that, as the white guy in the entry level, man, if I was 10 years older, racism would have helped me a lot more.
Right. That is true, but it's like half and half true, that statement, right? Like, so like, you're right that it's true in those circumstances, but if we're talking about like marriage equality or the ability to vote or civil rights, the other is true. And so like, they're misusing something.
That's a way of critically thinking. Your argument is it's not one you could just take and plaster anywhere when the argument's happening. That's 100% true.
But that is, again, applying critically. You can't just apply that.
I heard it said once and people clapped, so I'm going to say it in my argument. So have you, I know you can't read, but have you ever read Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality?
No.
I so recommend it. It's at HPMOR, Harry Potter Methods of Rationality, HPMOR.com. Or if you Google it, obviously you'll find it. It started on a skepticism website. HPMOR.com is a mirror of that section of the site, just to have the story. And somebody basically rewrote Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's/Philosopher's Stone. But what if you use skepticism? And the plot basis was that Harry's aunt and Petunia, instead of marrying Dursley, which she the reason she was cranky and mean is because she was so skinny and she wasn't very pretty, and she settled for this asswipe who could support her, and then her life became miserable. In this version, she went to her sister and said, "Can't your magic do something for me?" And being great at potions, Lily made a potion that made her fill out a little more and cleared up her skin and fixed her teeth. And then she felt better about herself, so she dumped Dursley, who she was dating, married a college professor, So then when Harry's parents died, Harry went to live in this loving home with an aunt who loved him and was raised with science and knowledge. And it's a cool story. And it
but
changes
no
a lot of the
Dudley.
things. It changes a lot of the other stuff around the story also. But it's also it's meant to be a primer on critical thinking and fallacies. Like Harry's explaining that to people, like that can't be true because he explains a critical theory. Like every chapter has a different fallacy or critical thinking piece that he explains as he uses it. So, and it's a very well written thing, and it's not written by a transphobe, so it's really cool.
That's
Nice.
It's a great
yeah.
primer on learning. It's a great way to learn a lot of the critical thinking and logical fallacies and stuff.
I bet too, if they did it for every book, which doesn't sound like they have, but if they did it for every book, that they would not end up with the suspicion that Snape is the bad guy every single time.
Yeah, I mean, I think they drift so far from the first book they couldn't keep going. Like the second book wouldn't work, and it took them I think years to do it. Like I used to listen to it, like they were doing a reading of it, like a podcast, and then they started people volunteering to read parts. So I went from one person reading it to a cast over time because people were like reading bits MP3s and they were editing it together and
nice
playing it.
Logan listened to an audiobook today on the ride home, so I might have to tell him about that because he might be really into it. And
it may be a little more adult than him. It's a little more adult than the real book. Like it's got brutal, violent stuff.
Oh, okay.
Maybe. I don't remember all the details, but I think you might want to read it first.
Okay, I will look into that because he, him and I have talked a lot about it, about these ideas of critical thinking and trying to build that within him, and and he's
TV commercials is what I did with the kids, which was really good because this there's going to be like, do you think that game is as fun as those kids are making it out to be? And it also stops him from wanting everything he sees on TV. So it's a good, and protects him as a consumer because consumerism is a good place to start.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true.
My other favorite websites for critical thinking stuff is yourlogicalfallacyis.com and the sister site yourbias.is. And they both have like at the top little icons, and you click on them and you can scroll through all these different biases and all these different logical fallacies and learn them. And I think it's important to know that these things were kind of informally formalized as a self-check more than they're not meant as people use them as debate tools. You did this fallacy. But like I said, there's a fallacy, so that's not really good. It's more meant that when you're writing your debate, then you're writing your post, you should go through and check, am I committing any of these fallacies to make yourself a better writer and a better at articulating your thoughts? So you should avoid the fallacies. That's really what it's meant for, like self-diagnosing your fallacy and your bias, not meant to use to attack others.
So one thing that came up yesterday with Sarah and her father and Logan and I were talking, and this is something that I think this is a way in which critical thinking, if we can improve it real quick, will help us outside of the normal. Is when AI is getting more pervasive, it is going to be more realistic, and we have to be able to do what we can to determine what's bullshit that way too. And the example that I was talking, because they were talking about AI, and Sarah was like, well, people can tell when it's fake. There's like something, she read an article about the human brain, there's like that uncanny valley thing. And I'm like, but there are
that
ways
valley is
in
getting
which
shallower as time goes on.
And there's ways in which it's reinforcing biases. And I brought up the example of Chris Cuomo shared a clip on, this is 4 or 5 months ago. The House wasn't in session, and this was during the height of the Sydney Sweeney jeans controversy. Do you know what video I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Chris Cuomo shared this video of AOC on the floor of the House talking about the jeans controversy and how we all just want to play with Sydney Sweeney's luscious fun bags. Those are luscious might not be right. Fun bags is definitely the word that AOC used. And Chris Cuomo either shared it on his Twitter or put it on his show, I forget which, as an example of how crazy the far left has gotten.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was like, that is obviously fake. And he goes, it's hard to tell what's fake anymore because this is something I could totally see. And it's like, you could see AOC saying fun bags,
Right.
not reading something. Like maybe if she's reading something, you could see her
I'm not
talking
quoting,
about
but
Sydney
saying.
Sweeney's. Yeah. You could see her just out of the thin air being like, Sydney Sweeney's fun bags need to be played with. Because I don't think that that's the thing that could really happen in real life. And so like that arms me against that particular, it's not going to
Yeah, what's
arm me
interesting though
against
is how
everything.
both of those viewpoints of I can't imagine her saying it, I think she would say it all the time, are both make it harder for you to tell if that's a
Yeah.
fake video or not, because you're going to not want to believe it or want to believe it. Like both those get in the way of unbiased look at the video and say, oh,
Sure.
they're not in session. It can't be
Right.
possibly true. She's in New York right now, not in DC. But, you know,
Right.
versus just saying, well, there are people like, here's an example from recently, Alex Preddy, right? The video that came out from 2 weeks ago when he was like assaulted by ICE for kicking a car, an ICE vehicle, whatever. And
JD
when
Vance
that
shared
first started
this,
getting-
right? I think JD Vance shared the video you're about to mention.
Yeah. It came from the right. And I saw people on Reddit saying, it's obviously AI. Why are you even addressing it? And then, people came out that, no, it's news sources were like, no, Minneapolis News, like, yeah, that's a true video. It's real. Like, it still doesn't support their fucking argument. It just makes it worse. Like, if they knew that was him, then they targeted him, and that's premeditated murder. Like, it makes it worse for their side.
It was
their
ruled a
argument.
homicide today by the judge.
Yeah, but it's something like though people right away were jumping to say it must be AI because it doesn't
fit the narrative,
meet with my preconceived notion. It can the fact that you don't want to believe it can make it just as hard to get to truth.
So okay, that's great. That's a good thing to bounce off of real quick, which means that like when we have those critical thinking moments of like that doesn't seem real, or then we need to go, okay, this is a moment for me to go check.
Right.
Because
you never make the assumption. If it's something that's worth checking, because maybe you don't give a shit.
Your name's not Ralph, but I don't care.
Right. Yeah. But research it and try to find out if you. And if you don't know, don't share it. Don't comment. Wait until you have more information. You don't have to comment or share every single thing you see. Make sure it's accurate before you become part of the problem.
Yeah.
Ooh,
absolutely.
That's getting marked. That was good.
If I knew he was going to mark things, I would be pithy more often.
I accidentally pithed myself earlier, so
I thought about making the joke, and I said I'm going to leave it. I'm just leave it out there. If you want to make it, you can make it.
It was only recently that Donnie pithed himself amongst a bunch of press, and they had to rush him out of the room.
Did that really happen?
I can't even pith.
I'm pretty darn sure.
Yeah. I asked that to be skeptical, to point out that seems. It doesn't. It seems like it could happen, but it also seems like it's one thing we will never be able to confirm or
until long after he's no longer
confirm
president.
either way. Yeah, like that's there's a lot of stuff, and that I think it frustrates people too in this day and age. Is there are things we're not going to be able to know for sure.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
People are okay with it to some extent if it's in the past, like it's far enough in the past. Although even still, we have people who are really, questioning what happened with, I don't want to just get into conspiracy theory, but like things that are kind of open-ended where there is an opportunity for the story not to be true, the given story not to be true. Not to say that it's necessarily some crazy conspiracy theory, but like JFK's assassination, there was in there that you could be like, this could be slightly different than we were told.
Yeah.
Right. And people get, into that. But the idea of like, look at Charlie Kirk's, assassination, like people want to know, it's been less than 6 months since he was assassinated. And people are like, well, where are we at with the trial and where we, and it's like, well, the OJ trial was 3 years or something? Like,
murder trials take time to get to. They
take time. You have to accumulate information. You have to go do your due diligence and get all the information. And it's not a process.
Can we normalize that Kyle Rittenhouse is an adjective and Charlie Kirk is a verb? Like, you don't want someone to go all Kyle Rittenhouse and Charlie Kirk someone.
But anyway, so you know, like when we are looking at stuff like the Charlie Kirk assassination and wanting answers, some answers we are likely never to get as the public.
Yeah, very true.
Some answers are going to take time, and that is the necessary way of doing things. That's why I think I've mentioned it to both of you, maybe off the podcast, but it drives me a little crazy when somebody like Diddy gets arrested and the next day there's the documentary about it. And it's like, no, that's news. And like news is subject to change, right?
It is
News
going to change as we learn more.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Documentaries carry with them a certain weight of like, you know, like the
Journalistic
the
integrity,
Menendez
one
brothers
would hope.
documentary. Sure,
One
but
of my
also
favorite things I saw is if you see a documentary on Netflix and stuff, it's probably not a good one
No,
because the good ones are so full of information and
Mhm.
facts.
they're not
that
entertainment. They don't belong on
it's not on
Netflix.
Netflix.
Yeah.
It's not a
Okay.
hit.
that's fair. That's a fair
And it may be
statement
an
also.
overgeneralization, but it's I just love it.
I
Yeah,
don't
that's a
think we're
fair
going
statement
where
also,
Mike's
but-
going on this. Let's.
No, yours is also a fair statement. But what I was going to say is like there is a certain when level of
There's a
hindsight
gravitas because you think a
hindsight
documentary should
and
mean something.
and finality to like we to some extent think we know what happened with the Menendez brothers story, right? And there was details that got brought out by the documentary that came out
Yeah.
because you know it came out almost 30 years later. So like there is, you know, like, oh, we the general public didn't know this piece and that
I feel
piece.
so sorry for those kids. You know, they're orphans.
Well, I mean, like I never heard that they were being abused by their father up until those documentary. I didn't watch the documentary, but
Well,
like my
I
point
had,
being,
but maybe it's because you were young at the time. You may not have heard all the
Fair.
news as much.
absolutely
too, yeah.
fair.
Because
Absolutely
that
fair.
was the kind of their claim. That was their defense.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like the point being, like there, you know,
The Burning Dead defense.
that is a very different thing to me than the Diddy documentary or
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
because
Because documentaries, people think it's a documentary. That means it's vetted. That means it's
Yeah.
impartial, and it's
which
not.
is not true, but at least
people think it. Yeah.
yeah, but at least you can understand that there is some consensus.
Mhm.
Whereas like the day after
I would push back on that. I mean, I think you can make a very
Sure.
biased, one-sided documentary
maybe
that
when it's
pushes an agenda that comes across as really well put together and true,
yes. Yeah, you're
but
right.
it's completely biased. And if you haven't researched other stuff, you know, don't trust it. Just, you know,
Yeah.
there's no ombudsman making sure a documentary
Right.
is factual and unbiased. You know, anyone
Fair.
can make a documentary.
Fair. Yeah, you're right. So but still I think that we have as society like set our expectations wrong.
Yeah.
When it comes to a lot of this
Where
stuff.
where
A
the
rush to
validity
judgment is never
starts
a
and
good
ends.
Right. And if you watch, you know, like I always watch like, you know, we're watching Malcolm X, right? Like I just mentioned, Malcolm X is a true story.
Are you going to leave all that stuff you said about Malcolm X in? All that negative stuff?
Everything I said about Malcolm X stays in because I've said nothing
I
particularly
can't
bad.
believe that much meta profanity is being kept in, but okay, whatever.
Anyway, so you know, like you look at a movie like a Malcolm X or any of these biopics or any movie that is telling a story that's a true story, we all kind of know that they're playing around with narrative.
Is it a true story? Is it based on a true story? Is it inspired by a true story?
But we understand that like order of things may be changed for pacing, and things may be left out, and you know, a lot of times people are getting meshed to, you know, like two characters, like if the story of my life, you two could get meshed together and neither one of you is that important on your own,
changed.
right?
Like two things happened at the same time in the movie version, though really it was 20 years apart, but it was more exciting. I mean, that's like Ron Howard, supposedly when Jim Lovell was on set for Apollo 13, and he kept saying it wasn't like that. I mean, we're all professionals. We were not panicking like that. We were not showing, we were totally calm and cool and collected. And Ron Howard kept saying, yeah, but I'm making a movie.
Right.
like I'm intentionally changing it. I'm going to keep true to the overall story.
Right.
But like when the wrong person says, Houston, we've had a problem. And they say, Houston, we have a problem instead of we had. It was we had because they were cool, calm, and collected and solved half the problem before they called home. You know? So, but like, I'm making a movie. I need tension.
Right.
It's not, it needs to be entertaining. So it's not just facts.
And a good portion, I actually won't say majority, but a good portion of people understand that. Like when they're watching a movie like that. When you're talking about a documentary or the news, you don't understand. You're just saying like, oh, this is the story being told, and like storytelling is storytelling, even when it's documentary form. And there are things, you know, like you and I both watched the first episode of the Mel Brooks thing. I know you watched the second.
I have watched both episodes now.
I thought there was 3 or 4, but that's fine.
No, there's 2. It's just part 1, part 2.
But you know, there was that part where Mel's telling the same story over and over again about
There's all these different clips from different interviews,
and that one stays pretty similar because it's a performance. But like, still, we know that people they change little details, and you change it based on your audience. Exact
quote certainly changed. Like he said, and Sid said this, and Sid said this, and like those aren't the same.
Yeah,
you know,
and that's a thing that happens. That's why, you know, they say that eyewitness testimony isn't that reliable in a lot of ways. You know, there's like, you know, if I'm trying to recall something you said specifically, or you know, there's all kinds of
like, and then Mel Brooks, there's one where he says the line they cut out of Blazing Saddles was "You're sucking on my arm," and I could swear I've heard in a different interview him say "You're sucking on my elbow" was the line that they cut out. And it's the same, you know, he could have made the mistake, or my memory could be wrong, and he said arm, and I retold it as elbow once, and that's what I remember. But so unimportant, non-consequential, but take that to the next level when it is consequential. It's easy to make mistakes.
Yeah, and that's assuming everything we just said too is assuming the best of intentions on the storyteller's part. Like that, you know, there is also the fact that we know people are lying to us. Nobody is denying that people are lying to us. Yeah. Whether you're left or right, everyone thinks someone's lying.
They're just arguing over who's lying to us.
And so like when we start to pull that into consideration, that even when you're telling me something fully good faith, fully earnestly, even if it's not necessarily correct, you could be wrong. Then you have to apply that at minimum to everything, and be able to do what you do the research you can do, figure out, and again, like you said before, if you don't know, don't share. Or I do this probably maybe too much. You guys tell me what you think, but I caveated a lot with, I wasn't able to find a source confirming or denying. Like I'll say something like that where people be like, you know, this is a funny story, this is an interesting fact or you know, trivia thing.
Like when people jumped in saying the Alex Preddy video was fake, I was like, okay, whether it's fake or not, here's what, you know, it would mean. Like you know, I'm not saying it's true, but if it is true, it's worse. You know,
So and that's a fair way of approaching things, is saying like, okay, assuming this, which, but you know, let's assume.
I once had an improv director that I joined a group, and I was more experienced than the person running the group, and he was saying shit that was just wrong, like bad improv advice, like absolutes, like this can't work, blah blah blah. I'm like, I fucking done it and it worked. So
and everybody knows the rule of no.
Right, which is wrong. That I mean, that wrong of not the rule of not saying no is a way to get students more quickly on stage more easily. It's not. It's always wrong. It's not. The original wasn't. It's always wrong. The original was avoid denials, and that got filtered down to never say no, which is wrong.
I meant as opposed to and.
Right. Well, I'm saying like yes and is a general rule. It's not always correct. You know, like you get up with a really stupid scene if somebody makes a mistake and says something that's completely wrong and contradicts what happened in the scene. Sometimes it's just crap. My thing is, if you would script the word no, it's okay to say the word no. But the director got mad at me for pointing out that what he said was wrong. I'm like, so we would do worse work. We would be worse performers because you don't want to be told you're wrong. He's like, that's the way it works when you're the director. I was like, you are a horrible director. And eventually, we have what was called the bloodless coup, where the group rose up and said, we want Matthew to be the director. Like they told him he had to step down, then told me I'm the new director because he's not doing a good enough job. And clearly I knew more than him. Yeah.
All right, so let's start wrapping things up. I do want to talk to you about improv after we're done, because I had like a story for you real quick after. But
I do have one thing I want to say before we wrap up.
Sure.
We touched on earlier, and as we went down a different path, was you were talking about people's opinions versus facts and stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the things that frustrates me, and I would love for people to learn what an opinion is. Like, I think Obama was born in Kenya is not an opinion. You are
Agreed.
stating what a fact that's either right or wrong. It's not an opinion. I like that he was born in Kenya is an opinion,
Okay.
Yeah.
not that he
Well,
was.
that's
What
that.
your feeling about it is an opinion. Whether it's true or not is not an opinion. People
Right.
like that's why you can't have your own facts and say they're your opinion. You can't say, in my
Yeah.
opinion, he did it. No, that's not really an opinion. That's your hypothesis.
yeah.
That's where your opinion is. I like that it happened, not did it happen.
Yeah. That is part of why I said the Biden is the best president ever.
Yeah.
Is my opinion. And then I said because he's the one who legalized gay marriage, which
He did.
was a fact. No, he didn't.
A
It was
fact,
under
right
it was
or
under
wrong.
Obama. I mean,
Yeah.
Biden was part of the administration, but you know
Well,
what I mean.
the thing is, no
Yeah.
president did it. The Supreme Court did
Sure,
it.
fair.
Like it wasn't even no president did it.
Yeah.
The Supreme it didn't legalize it. They just said the current Constitution does not let you forbid it. So it's just go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Right. So that is part of why I worded that way. But yes, you're right that like facts and opinions can be very different. And
Like
there
if that's
are
chocolate
only
ice cream, it's chocolate ice cream. Whether you like it or not is your opinion.
Right.
You don't get to say I don't think it's chocolate ice cream.
there are a couple of things that people will disagree that are I think you would say is probably like not is an opinion.
It's
I
not
think is
knowing
a
what the
fact.
fact is and having a different
Yeah.
different slant on what is the fact and what the percentage of being right or wrong is of the fact, but it's not an opinion.
But there are certain things that I think people would say. I'm going to give you an example of something that I know is a fact, which is cracking spaghetti in half is wrong. That is a fact. And some people think that's an opinion, and those people are also wrong.
Yeah, well, I think the better
My
way to say it is by Italian tradition and culinary rules, pasta should be served the size that it is made
Yep.
by the person who made pasta, with the exception of some pastas that are made to be broken. There are some long, like extra long noodles similar to spaghetti in shape, but they're meant to be broken to irregular sizes. But that's a fact. Your opinion is whether you think that makes a difference or not, whether it's good or not. But it is a fact that by culinary tradition and in Italy, it is not meant to be broken.
I appreciate that you just yes-anded my stupid joke and made it.
It made it 100% like
I thought it's legit.
critical.
All right, so let's wrap things up. Anybody last thoughts before we start the
outro?
So yeah, I'm just going to do it because you're going to cut me off otherwise. So in the chat are Adfontes Media and also the allsides.com media bias charts. Familiarize yourself with them. They're a great way to make sure to understand the bias of a source. It's not per article, it is per source, but at least you can break it down by radio, television, and print. So there's...
We need to put those in the show notes for later.
That's why I threw them in the chat in YouTube so that we can easily pull them. So those are important to use to make sure that you're getting as... And honestly, I've said this to other people before. You know it's good news when it's boring. So C-SPAN is hella boring, but it is the most undiluted version of what went on. You know,
well, it's not. C-SPAN's not really news, though. You know, because there's different levels. There's like Reuters or C-SPAN is here are the facts of what happened. It becomes like journalism when you say, and here's
that's
the
true.
background and the context, and that's where the bias starts slipping in. But it still can be valuable because saying, President Trump said that only violent immigrants have been brought, been so saying I've been deported. So like, okay, saying that's a fact that he said that, but without saying, and we know he's lying because of all these other things, is important to make it news.
Right. So
Also, just a quick defense of C-SPAN. I watched about a half hour of C-SPAN last night. They do like a book club, and it was
they do have some news portions,
and it was an interview
with
with this,
running in the background, and you're watching what's going on.
It was an interview with John Beecham. It was really interesting.
And PBS News make the most attempt to be unbiased while giving you context and background for sure.
All right, so
and you know what? When I think that if you think that they're not taking the attempt, you should make a comment down below in any of these clips that you're watching. You should comment, and while you're commenting, you've got your hand on the keyboard. Go ahead and like this video, go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Go ahead and ring the notification bell so you know when we go live. We are missing our most loyal people today, and I think it's because they didn't get the notification for whatever reason. I mean, they're
Oh.
probably off doing something very important, being snowed in. And then thank you for engaging in our videos. We appreciate it.
We do. And if you want to, you can go on our Patreon at patreon.com/talking about the big stuff. And you can get your name added to the list that we just played. And you'll also be able to get access to the episodes early. You'll be able to get access
Better
to
audio video sync would have been to play that while talking about it, but that's okay.
Yeah, but I knew I was going to be talking and I can't run the thing and talk at the same time.
Audio visual sync.
But anyway, like I said, patreon.com/talking about the big stuff. You can go to there to get access early, get your name on the special thanks credits. You can get extra content. We talk before the show, and sometimes it's really interesting. I actually think it's always pretty interesting.
Those are pretty interesting people.
Yeah,
We tend to be.
And obviously the other thing is that you could help expand the show by doing that. But if you don't feel like you can, at least go onto your podcast app of choice and give us a like, thumbs up, that kind of thing. So thank you. Matthew, any last thoughts?
I just want to thank everyone for being here to talk about the big stuff. Everything we said today was true.
And factual.
And yes, and verified. Maybe.